Hello, everyone, and welcome to Living by the Law, the podcast discussing fictional worlds and how wondrous and ridiculous they are. My name is Matt, and I'm joined by my co-host, Jude and Guy. Living by the Law is not currently sponsored. If you wish to sponsor us, travel west and cross the nearest sea on the first boat you find. Continue sailing until you hit an island full of weird tree children. Greet them, and then sing them your sponsorship offer before stabbing them in the back 12 times. We will hear you. We always do.
This time, we'll be discussing George R.R. Martin's fantasy world of Westeros from the Song of Ice and Fire book series and the Game of Thrones TV show. Warning, this will contain spoilers for Song of Ice and Fire and Game of Thrones. Hello and welcome to Living by the Law. I am your main and face host, Jude, and I'm joined by my resident fuckwit, Matthew Doyle.
Wait, what?
And our lovely face of the podcast, Guy Wheeler.
I'm so glad that Matt got labelled as the fuckwit.
Yeah.
Wait, I do all the...
I rescind my comment. I'm not glad that Matthew got that title. I've worked hard to earn that title.
Exactly.
How has
How dare
Matt
you
gotten
take that away
promoted
from
above
Guy?
me? How dare you?
How dare you take that away from
If you'll
Guy?
excuse me, I'm now going to
His
eat
role.
apricots into the microphone.
Well, I just thought that I'd start the episode with a big-ass betrayal, because this episode is all about political backstabbing and betrayal, you see.
Shit,
And
we're not
Jerome?
getting political, are we? What?
Because it's about Game of Thrones.
Oh. I thought it was going to be about, like, the Greeks or the Romans.
Hey, Guy,
I
together
wish.
with...
That'd be cool.
Oh, I don't know if you... We gotta do
Go on,
this.
go on,
literally-
go on,
hey.
go on.
That's it. That's it.
How many episodes
I'm
have
not
you
doing it
watched,
unless someone
Matthew?
joins me.
How many episodes
All
have you
of them.
watched?
All of them.
How many episodes have you watched, Jude?
All of them, yeah.
I'm glad that I can play the main character of a book in this, because I have literally, and I do not overstate this, have watched 0 minutes of Game of the Thrones.
Game of the Thrones.
Game of the Thrones. The game of the
Well, I was about to say Lord of the Rings, so you'd be glad I at least got that far.
Yeah. I was gonna say you're going Lord of the Game of the Thrones.
Can we go back to the start of the episode though? I think you are the brains of the podcast. I'm the face because I'm the good looking one, obviously, and Guy's the fuckwit.
Yes.
You know what? I'll go with that. Sure, let's roll with that.
I'd say I don't think I'm the fuckwit. I think I'm the alternative thinker, the artist, you know?
Yeah,
I
we need another voice.
Yes.
We need to we can't just agree with each other. Jude and I are just too reasonable. We need someone
You
to
know,
go.
you know when
"Hey."
you know that horrible histories meme that's floating around where it's death taking people. And they're like, I'm this person. And he says, I'll just write unemployed. Guy going, I'm the creative thinker of the podcast.
I'll just write fuckwit.
How dare you? How dare you?
But yes, so we're talking about Game of Thrones today. And yes, I've seen it, and Matt's seen it, and Guy has not seen any of it. Matt, have you read any of the books?
No.
Okay.
I haven't read books, but I'm an expert because I've watched theories on YouTube, so I am
Okay.
expert in all games. Yes, that is...
Very good, very good.
You should be able to put that on a resume these days. Watched YouTube theories on the subject.
Oh, no.
Yes, I'm
Watching
going for this
YouTube
job, and I watched many YouTube
tutorials.
how-tos.
So many
Exactly,
videos about it.
so many.
I mean, that's basically my degree, to be fair.
I was gonna say
Yeah.
that is also just all uni at the moment, isn't it? Just watching
Yeah,
videos.
oh
on
my
it.
god, yeah. Uni has just turned into YouTube tutorials.
I was watching a video the other day and it had a comment underneath it from it was an Indian tutor teaching some mathematical
God.
theory.
They're
And
the
someone
best.
in the comments was like, Indian tutors just hit different for math subjects.
Yeah.
It's like, yeah, mood. Computing theory subjects.
It's like your teacher will say something for like an hour, and then you watch one YouTube thing on one like instructional thing, and it was like 10 minutes long, and you'll get like everything.
Well, the other problem that I have is that my teacher is like a doctorate in this sort of shit. Like, he's big brain. And then this random fucko on YouTube's just like, pumping lemma go brr. It's like, okay, I understand. I see.
Yes,
Sometimes
yes.
you just need to talk on a simple level, you know?
Exactly.
That's actually not an oversimplification of the pumping lemma, to be honest. I'm not going to get into it, but that's essentially what it is.
Okay,
so
so Jude, Game of Thrones.
yes. Game of Thrones, otherwise known as A Song of Ice and Fire, if you go by the name of the book series. Yep. Well, and what I'm going to talk about today, a little bit, maybe a little bit different to the episode shtick I've been doing, where I talk a bit about the worlds, but also like a bit of a storyline. I'm not really addressing storyline at all in this. I'm literally just talking about the world. If you look at the world at the start of the book/show, this is what that world is, and a little bit of backstory on some of the things, because you kind of need a bit of backstory. But yeah.
Yeah, because doesn't it have like there's prequel books as well, right?
Sort of. Yeah. There's prequel. I believe there's one prequel that's come out. And then there's also been a book come out recently. It's how can I say? It's less of prequel books and more in the same way that you could call the Silmarillion a prequel to Lord of the Rings, but like it's more just a historical account than an actual story, if that makes sense.
Okay, yeah.
There's a few books that old Georgie's put out that are like, here is a detailed historical account of this thing, but there's not like any big story series or anything as a prequel.
Yeah, I had a really dumb thought.
Not uncommon.
I love this already. Yep.
I was like, it's called A Song of Ice and Fire, so should we make Jude just sing the entire episodes? Seeing as
That
the
is a
only one
dumb thought. Hey, you know what? 10 out of 10, you were right.
I said it's a dumb thought. I mean, he's the only one who can sing, so we should make him sing the whole
Entirely
episode.
What if I just talk the whole time normally, but then just put auto-tune on my voice?
Auto-tune on your voice.
So it just sounds really
And so
terrible.
Joffrey gets fucking stabbed.
And he said, fuck you.
Oh, I can't fix that. So anyway, we'll start by the main focus is going to be the continent that all of the story takes place on, which is Westeros.
Ooh.
Which, you guessed it, can you guess which direction in the world Westeros is?
North.
South.
Yes. Yes. Correct both times. They're really creative, actually, because they've got a western continent and they've got an eastern continent. The western one's called Westeros, and the eastern one's called Essos.
No, Easteros.
Easteros, yes. Anyway, so it is a...
I mean, we've got the North Pole.
That's true, we do.
Yeah, but, like, it is also referred to... Like, the continent's referred to as the Arctic, you know? We don't call... The North Pole is just, like, a designation of this is the northmost point of the world.
Imagine we just called it Northland.
Yeah.
Oh my god! I just realized. In New Zealand, they're literally called the north of the North Island, the Northland, and the south of South Island, Southland. So
Hell yes, we like that.
it's called. I mean, in Australia, there's Northern Territory.
Yeah. Well,
South
that's... Yeah.
But
Australia.
I think the
West
problem with
Australia.
Westeros and stuff like that is that they're trying to be clever. They're like, ooh, Westeros, rather than just like the Western lands. But
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
How I always saw it is like maybe in Old English it was called Westlands.
Yeah.
In the old, I don't know if they speak English.
Anywho.
Yeah. So anyway, Westeros is a continent/country, depending how you look at it, because technically you could call it a country, but then also sometimes people refer to Australia as a continent/country. You get the idea. And it has been conquered many, many times throughout its history by lots of different racial groups. So first off, Westeros was a land only really lived in by this group of people called Children of the Forest.
That's a question. Just I know most people should know, but just as a base, like Game of Thrones is like a medieval fantasy world, right? So
This is a fair point, yes.
how is it defined? Because like I feel like there's some people, Game of Thrones is huge, but some people like have heard of it or don't even know what it is.
It's
How would you define it?
Please help me.
It depends which point you look at. If you look at it from the perspective of the early books and show, it's very much a medieval sort of setting, a lot of realism and everything, and then as the show goes on it gets progressively more fantasy-esque until it just is like magic.
So I guess it's got some like medieval times in like our world, but
It's
what if magic exists?
It's basically an author writing a fanfic about the War of the Roses, if anyone knows British history.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
Okay. War of the Roses. Look. A bunch of great houses had a fight. There was and I won't get into.
I'm
that
with
too
you.
much.
I'm with you.
Yeah.
So it's a medieval fantasy with magic.
Yeah, it's the Yorks and the Lancasters. Definitely not the Starks and the Lannisters. Anyway, that's a whole other thing. And yeah, it's basically just even in terms of the geography of the world, it's basically just the United Kingdom but flipped upside down. And there's a lot of subtle / not so subtle references. So like in the way that men invade the south of the region and then they build a big wall in the north, and anyone that lives beyond the wall is barbarians, in the same way that the Romans invaded England, built a big wall, Hadrian's Wall, and said those guys beyond it, they're barbarians. So it's there's
how many books there's books and TV shows, and is there more than that? I don't actually know.
Pretty much. I mean, there's a lot of things. There's what's the word? The main things are just the books and the TV shows. Yeah, I believe there's a few comic adaptations. There's lots of different games and interpretations. There's a lot of different. There's a little bit of how can I say? I don't know. Maybe difficulty. There's a few games that have been made which are like, are they canon? Are they not canon? Whatever.
Yeah. So just for people at home, like I think Game of Thrones as a TV show has like 8 seasons. It's done, and Game of Thrones it has like a few books, but it's not finished yet. It's still going.
Yeah, the books are not. Yeah, I was going to say that part. The TV shows. No, that's right. TV shows concluded, but the books are not yet, and they may never be finished. But we'll see.
So the world's still evolving.
Yeah.
So we don't have a finished copy yet.
Yeah, kind of. The world as like the backbone of the world, so all the parts. That's part of the reason as well. I'm just addressing the beginning of the world before the show and everything starts, is because that's pretty much fully established. There's not really any of like the really big changes that haven't happened in the books yet. They've happened in the show, and it's been confirmed that they would also happen in the books, if that makes sense. Because also for guys' knowledge, because I'm sure guys well aware have how books can be butchered when they get adapted to screen.
Oh yeah,
sometimes.
no, I was fully aware of the season 8.
Yeah, season. Honestly, season 5 onwards, but it was basically one of those things. The show got to like massive fame when it was directly copying the books, and then they got to the end of season 4, about halfway through season 5, they started to overtake the books and a lot of different characters. And then as soon as they got to that point, the show just steadily had a little bit of a decline.
Doesn't mean you shouldn't watch it.
Oh no, it's still great. Just stop at the end of season 4 is my recommendation. Nah,
I think you continue it.
No, look, honestly, you can get a degree of enjoyment out of the whole thing, but you know,
it's the fucking Icarus comparison to Harry Potter movies.
Yeah, kind
They
of.
got cocky and flew too close. They started doing their own shit.
Mm-hmm. They really did. Yeah. And there's a lot of. It was also one of those things where changes they made, because, you know, as always, you have to make some changes when you go from book to screen, just because book has way too many characters sometimes that you just can't fit into screen time. So a lot of changes they made early on in the TV show were totally fine at the time, but then it meant when it got to later seasons, things just didn't exist which they needed, if that makes sense. And as people probably know as well, Game of Thrones prides itself a lot off of killing major characters, which is fine in the books because they've got so many characters you've been introduced to that you can just jump around to new characters. But then in the TV show, when you've got not as many characters involved with plot lines, when you start to lose them, all of a sudden you get to the final season and it's like, oh, I guess this random soldier dude's a super important character now because everyone else is just dead.
Yeah.
So yeah, you run into a few issues when you start killing off, when you start not including things. But you know, you work with what you've got, and people can agree. You can give them shit, but they did a pretty good job with the TV show. They just didn't stick the landing with the end. Is kind of the concern. We're not here. We're not here to judge.
We're not here to review. We're not here to review.
No, we are. We're here to review it.
Yeah. We're here to
I
roast
was
the
gonna
TV
say
You haven't-
I was gonna say earlier. You said the Greek and Roman history would be a good episode. It's like, well, now we're a history podcast, and then we can become a review podcast until eventually it just becomes a mess. Is
It
what
does.
this podcast?
I mean,
will be.
you're
like-
implying it isn't already a mess.
That's fair. You've got me.
If we're a review podcast, Guy has failed. He hasn't done his homework. And
Oh yeah, that's fair enough. No, I'm just gonna listen. I'm just gonna sit here and call
guys-
bullshit on whatever you say.
Guy's the mum that rocks up to book club just to drink the wine without reading the book.
Don't at my mum, Jesus.
nah, Liz is amazing.
Yeah.
Can't hurt Liz.
So anyway, where the books and the show starts, it's basically just it's technically high fantasy, but it draws from a lot of elements of dark fantasy. So but it more prides itself on being very gritty and realistic and everything. And there's a lot of very well done, historically accurate stuff in the way people are and the way society is, which props to Georgie for that. Anyway. But beforehand, because go figure, there's always, and it's also inspired a lot by, and you'll see especially with what I'm about to talk about, it's a lot of inspiration from the Celtics being the original people that lived in England, well, the English Isles, and how they had all of their legends and myths about the Druids and everything. So anyway, we'll dive into that. So like I was saying, Westeros was originally a land which only had one main resident, the Children of the Forest, who are... They resemble human children, kind of, but they're more, to paint just a general fantasy-esque picture, they're kind of fae beings, sort of a little bit druidy elf people is the best way to think about it. They're very, like, nature magic-y, entwined with the earth and all that sort of thing.
Okay, but rather than being like ethereal age like elves, they're more...
They're more like children, yeah.
Okay, cool.
They're like nymphs or...
Yeah, that kind of, like, fae...
Giant.
Depends on your depiction of nymphs, but yeah.
Yeah,
That's
that
true.
kind of fae, sort of nymphy satire sort of thing, but without the bestial parts.
Tree children. We got it.
Yeah, exactly. Anyway, they were the people of Westeros, and they lived with the wildlife, and the other residents of the land, which were giants. They lived all over Westeros, and they lived in harmony with the Children of the Forest. And
So
that
small
was
people and very big people.
yeah, giants and children. And yeah, they had really strong magic and stuff, and that was just sort of them for a long time. And it was a really cool place.
Nice.
But then there was another continent, as I mentioned, to the east, Essos. Once again, yes, Essos, east, yes. And in the south of Essos and Westeros, there was a large land bridge, which connected the parts of Westeros, which is now known as Dawn, which we'll get into the parts of Westeros a bit later, but Dawn's kind of the south region in the modern age. And over this land bridge came the First Men, who were the next racial group to inhabit Westeros.
Incredible.
At first, they were kind of just, oh, there's these weird children thing here, and more First Men came over. They began to settle, and then, as they do, they began to get a bit aggressive, and then many, many, many years of war broke out between the First Men and the Children. During this war, the Children used their magic to break the land bridge, which separated the First Men from the land they came from, so they were stuck in Westeros now, which meant they got even more aggressive, because they're stuck here now. They can't just go back home. Well, to their ancestral home.
If they have enough power to sink like half a continent, why did they...
I was going to
not
ask
just
this.
kick
How is
them
it
out?
even a fight?
There
Why-
is
why-
actually a really, well, how can I say this? With a lot of George R. R. Martin's, who's the author of the books, by the way, with a lot of his backstory, the way he kind of justifies these big things without giving too much explanation, which we'll get to in a little bit, when the next racial group after the First Men come over, one of their big defining things is that they destroy pretty much all written record of the previous people. So all of the story that we go off is just what's passed down through cave paintings of the Children of the Forest and like stories that have been told generation to generation, which is why a lot of the history is really big, exaggerated, catastrophic events, if that makes sense, because it's what's been passed down from generation to generation,
And it might not be entirely
Yeah,
historically
exactly,
accurate.
exactly.
It,
When
it could have
it's-
been a natural flood that sunk the continent. and
Exactly.
the men blamed it on the kids.
Well, the other thing
Exactly.
to consider is that the kids might be having, oh Jesus, my mouth. there might be some kids who switch sides. You got some traitors.
Exactly. Like, you've got no... Yeah, it's one of those things, like, who the fuck knows what really happened. Anyway, so then the men got more aggressive, and it just turned into, according to some sources, millennia-long wars between the children, multiple different fighting over this land, then we stop. Then we're fighting over this land, then we stop. Over, like, long time. And then eventually, the children and the first men, they... Oh, actually, yes, one thing that happened right towards the end of the war, the children captured a group of first men, and they began experimenting on them with magic to see if they could make something to fight. And part of this was they got this, what's called dragon glass in the world, but is basically just obsidian. And they used magic and basically plunged it into the man's heart and turned him into what is known as a White Walker. Which is a thing you might know a bit about if you've just heard the general...
I've seen them.
Yeah, basically big ice zombie dudes, necromancy, that kind of power.
Sick.
So they get created by the Children of the Forest. The first one to get created is known as the Night's King, who is
kind of a dick move.
Yeah. Who goes on to be the leader of the White Walkers. The children are hoping that these White Walkers they've created will help the children get rid of the first men, because the children are starting to lose in the war because there's just so many men and they're just kind of outbreeding them, etc., as men tend to do in fantasy.
That's all we have.
It's
all
funny.
Human
It's
or men
so
have a number.
funny.
Exactly.
We never have magic. We never have we never have elegance or might. Or strength. We just have numbers.
That's why there's a series online called HFY, Humanity Fuck Yeah, which is just this sci-fi series about humans going into space and not actually being the weakest, but actually being one of the strongest, which is a series that I really like solely for the fact that it is one of the only things out there where humans aren't fucked in every way.
Middle ground.
Apart from
Humans
the fact
are either...
we're basically rat men and can live underground for like 3 weeks with no food.
Yeah, humans are either like the bottom of the table or middle, like everything neutral middle.
Yeah, read Humanity Fuck Yeah, it's a good series.
And the only time that in fantasy that they've been, excluding sci-fi, in fantasy that they've been not bottom tier was when they were the Númenóreans, and then they got corrupt and their island got sunk.
Hey, this isn't that episode. This isn't that episode. Wrong episode.
Anyway, so yes, the children of Forest started to get a bit desperate, so they did this dragon glass into the heart, and bam, created the necromancers, the White Walkers, and then the Night King and the White Walkers. They just kind of fucked off and disappeared into the north, and the children were like, oh. Okay. They retreated into the north, which was kind of like the more icy, polary regions. And they, they didn't know about it at the time, but supposedly that's when he began gathering his army / creating more White Walkers and zombies and everything. And he was up there for a long, long time. More on that later. And then after the war continued, the children realized they couldn't win.
The Night King will return.
Yes, he will. Always. Until he gets stabbed by a jumpy girl.
No, spoilers.
We're allowed to talk about spoilers, damn it, Matt.
No.
And anyway, so then the first men also wanted peace because they're fucking fighting magic druid people. Of course they want peace. And they agreed to a peace treaty, signing the pact, which happened at a place in the direct center of Westeros, which... No one will really know the location unless you've seen the show, but there's a place called the God's Eye Lake and an island that's called the Isle of Faces, which is in the center of this lake. You may have heard the name mentioned at some point, Matt.
Has weirwood trees on it, doesn't it?
Yeah. It's this tiny little island that's just got all these trees with faces carved into them.
Can I just cut Jude off for a second to see Guy, because we can see each other. The guy is just making like the most confused faces, just like throwing his hands up in the air, just trying to. It's like, what is happening?
I have no idea what I'm doing here. Listen, there's nothing I can bully. God's Eye Lake. Oh,
It's
there's
right.
no
The
joke
stuff-
to make. I was trying to make up a bad joke. There's not even bad jokes to make.
It's okay. The parts you can make jokes about are coming.
Me goof.
So, anyway, the children of the first men were then unified, and during this time period, it became known as the Age of Heroes, which it's a thing, but like I won't talk about it too much because whatever, it's not really important for what we're discussing mainly today. And then many kingdoms rose and fell, and then rose again, and then fell again during this time period, where the First Men were basically just becoming this really dominant race in Westeros, all throughout from north to south, and they lived in harmony with the Children of the Forest. That was until an event known as the Long Night, which is kind of the scary kids' tale of the books of the TV show / books. In the very first episode, you hear the old Nan talking to one of the main characters, who's like an 8-year-old, like, "Oh, you haven't heard the story of the Long Night," and stuff like that. Yes, Matthew.
I have 2 things. One, they lived in harmony until the Fire Nation attacked, or the Ice Nation.
Go
2.
away. Yeah.
Where are the giants? Because there
They're
were
still around.
giants.
They're still around.
They're still just there?
Yeah, they're still just there.
Ah, cool. Okay,
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, yeah.
So everyone's living in harmony.
Yeah. Well,
Giants are
the
just
giants,
chilling.
the giants weren't like a huge majority population. It was mainly the Children of the Forest. It's just that giants were also there. Same
So
with
giants
like,
are a minority in
yeah. They're just kind of there. They're just a part of the wilderness.
They're
Tell me
chilling.
more about this big dude and his big sword.
Yes. So,
What?
God damn it.
Who said he had a sword?
The
Anyway.
Long Night.
Fliz. So there was a long night, and then that's when, remember I mentioned, the Night King and the White Walkers, they came back down from the far north and just killed a bunch of people. And
Sick.
then, sick. And then the Children and the First Men formed an alliance, and they fought together this time, rather than fighting against each other, and they eventually defeated the Night King and sent him back into the north. But it's kind of an important note here that there isn't any documentation about all this stuff in the world. It's literally just passed down stories. Like, it's a really big deal in the TV show / books, because the Night King and the White Walkers are returning in the TV show, and they're all like, "How do we beat him? I don't know. How did they beat him the first time?" Nobody really knows. They just kind of did somehow.
From watching YouTube theories, I do love how a lot of the lore and this is like a different type of lore in this kind of book, where it's very much up in the air, because like nothing is. It's like real history. It's like we can try and piece together as much as possible to what we believe, but it's nothing. We don't actually know for certain.
Yeah, exactly. Which
Which I really like.
Yeah, and it's because this is a world where, especially the time period that the books and everything is set in, there are no ancient immortal elves or anything like that, so there isn't really people to keep track of the history. So, yeah, anyway. It's
What do you
basically...
think that conversation was like for the Children of the Forest? Hey,
What?
men. We fucked up. For real, though.
This dude's kind of coming down, and he's kind of...
Listen, it's our fault. My bad. I apologize. We could... He's gonna fucking kill all of us.
No. I think it was more like they're fighting the men. They're like, "My God, this guy's so powerful. We have to team up to defeat him." And then one of the Children of the Forest goes to the other team of the forest. Okay, just don't tell them we created them, okay?
No, my favorite part is all
Let's
like...
keep up between you and me.
Let's not tell them that it's actually one of their own people, but with like a shard of ice in his heart.
Let's
Let's
leave that.
Don't tell.
They don't need to know. They just need to kill it.
So anyway, they defeated the Night King. They pushed him back into the north, and then the First Men created the Wall, which is this huge ice, stone, and magic wall that basically acts as a massive barrier between the distant north and the habitable north. And it was constructed by a person known as Bran the Builder, who would go on to be the first king in the north and the Lord of Winterfell, which...
Oh, hell yeah.
He's the beginning of the Starks. You've probably heard the name Stark before, Guy, even if you don't know anything about the show, maybe from memes. Okay, no
I know what
worries.
to tell you, my man.
That's
Zero
so good,
minutes.
That's so good. They're one of the kind of main families of the show.
There's one single name that I know, and it's Jon Snow, and that's it. I know nothing more. He's got a cool
He's
coat.
kind of connected to the Starks, so that's
Sick.
yeah. So they're kind of his ancestors. Anyway, so after this, the children.
I think you're underselling this wall, though. Like, it was like 1,000. Isn't it like 1,000 feet high and 100 feet high and like 1,000 kilometers long or some shit?
Yeah, it's pretty big. It'd basically be, well, yeah.
This is like
It's kind of the equivalent if you. I mean, I suppose it doesn't help you Australians quite so much, but if you picture like United Kingdom and you picture England going into Scotland, and if you thought about building like a 100-meter wall, a 100-meter high wall from coast to coast between England and Scotland.
It's kind of fucking ridiculous.
Yeah,
That's huge.
yeah.
Hey,
It's
also
Massive.
you said that the king built it. Brian the Builder, whatever his name was. You said he built it out of ice, stone, and magic. I thought that the kids could only do magic.
The
Did he get a hand?
the children helped. Yes,
Okay, cool.
that
so
was.
they were in on
You
this.
could kind of. I guess
So,
that
no,
was
no,
their
no,
way
no.
of
After they-
repaying.
Same back. It's
After,
like,
no, but after
how
they
bad.
made that wall, is there now chill times for all on the side of the wall, or are the kids still in trouble?
No, the chill's on the other side of the wall. It's real cold up
Yeah.
there.
Yeah, so the children are
I
the children
will
are on the south of the
Come to
wall.
your house and shoot you.
It's
There's
a long way.
yeah. Anyway, so yes, that part. Yep. And then after the wall was constructed, a long time of good old-fashioned peace happens. But the children begin to dwindle in number over the course of a few thousand years. And then finally they were just disappeared, and people were like, oh, they're gone now. Okay. And all of a sudden, the first men were the only main race in Westeros.
Small question.
Yeah.
How did like there are people above the wall? There are like barbarian, like wildlings up there. If they built the wall, how did they get up there?
They were on the wrong side when they built it.
Imagine coming down, and being like,
Yep.
oh yeah, I was in a holiday up north, just going there for the summer, come back down, of the winter, come back down. There's a huge wall in the way, guys.
Well, it's straight up one of the character guy, Jon Snow, when he meets some of the people that come from north of the wall, the wildlings they're called, basically the barbarians. He meets when he's talking to one of them, and he's like trying to find some common ground, and he says, I've got the blood of the first men in my veins. We have the same ancestors. And then the character replies, then why'd they build a wall between us? It's like, it's a fair point. And she's like, my ancestors just happened to be on the wrong side of the wall when it was built. So like,
Fair.
fuck you.
Jon Snow, windmill expert.
I'm also imagining like I can't get this image out of my head of like a kid in a playground, and he's got a stick in his hand, and he gets the stick, drags it through the tambuck, makes a line, points the stick across the line, says, "Hey, fuck everybody over that side of the line," throws the stick down and walks off.
That is
No,
basically
but
it.
it's-
But
instead of a stick, it's a 100-meter high wall.
and
I mean,
armed to,
Bad metaphor, but you get the kind of idea of what I'm...
Yeah.
and we'll get into it a little bit more later, because I talk about some of the factions / guilds a bit later. But there's the Night's Watch who get founded at this time, and they're basically like especially in their beginning, they were a really elite force of warriors who were designed to man these like 20 castles along the distance of the wall. And their whole duty was to stop the return of the Night King, because they knew that he'd probably come back at some point. And at first they were really good, but then after like a few thousand years, they kind of declined and become like only 2 castles remain, and 3 castles remain, and they're kind of shit, But to begin with, they were really cool. But anyway, so the first men were the only race in Westeros. But one thing that had done, had fully adapted to the religion of the Children of the Forest, which is called the Old Gods, basically. And it's all to do with nature gods. They worship special trees with faces carved into them. And they basically see it as these trees with faces are the gods' way of looking into the world. So they're worshipping the trees like that. Yep, you can laugh at it.
Hey, like there are more ridiculous things in our world than that.
No,
Come
I
on.
appreciate that. It's just
But
very funny to me.
To be fair, when you're men and you come over, you see these weird fey creatures who can literally do
literal
magic.
I was
and they
going to say
"Oh, yeah,
that. It's like people super get into all the religions of our world, and yet there's no particular evidence that it does anything for you more than just a mental state sort of thing. I'm not going to get into the religion state. But if you get into it and you go into a church, you're like, my friend goes to here, I guess I'll check what it's like. And the fucking priest starts doing like magic tricks, and you can't doing sinking planets and random shit like that. Like,
Wait! You
Hey.
just went from like a sinking planets.
I fucked up sinking land bridges.
It's good.
You know what I mean?
But like, no. I'm just imagining a priest doing like basic magic tricks.
No,
making
I'm
people
not.
disappear.
I'm going to Drive
kill.
to your house.
He's like, I will make this sinner disappear.
Yep. Anyway.
He shoots him.
So they adapted their religion, and they, during this time period where it was just the first men before the next group arrive, they make a whole bunch of cities, and this is kind of where all of the cities that we know in the books and TV show get made, all of the major ones, with the exception of the capital. And when they get created, all these cities, they build these gods' woods, they're called. They're basically just like small little mini gardens inside the big castles and everything that have got one of these god trees in them, because they were super into that religion. Anyway, so then moving on, we have
Gotta love god trees.
Yes, we have the next group of the last kind of major group of races that arrive, known as the Andals. The original homeland of the Andals was once again in Essos. Go figure. Everyone comes from east. They really do. And they were located kind of in the northern region of the east. And they worshipped a different god called the Seven-Faced God, which we'll talk a little bit about later, just a little bit. And they were kind of spurred on by the new faith to go to Westeros. There's not too many details about it. Presumably some great prophet was like, we must sail west. And then they all sailed west and were like, hey, this land's kind of cool.
It's sick.
And they arrived, and they discovered that it was inhabited by the first men, but it's very much a Romans arriving in Celtic-controlled England. The Andals had chivalry, they had heavy iron-wrought weapons and steelcraft and armor, manufacturing, all sorts of high-end stuff compared to the fairly primitive... I mean, they weren't that primitive, they created quite a lot of cool stuff. But
they built a 100-meter high wall
with help from the Magic Children.
Yeah.
But yeah, compared to the ironworking and everything of the Andals, they didn't really have much. And as a society, the Andals were much more evolved. They were much more along the lines of slightly more late medieval period in terms of all chivalry and everything. And then the Andal arrival, like I say, it was not so good for the first men. They kind of got slaughtered big time.
Guess they couldn't handle them.
No, they really couldn't handle them. So, like I say, the Andals had lots of manpower, much more advanced metalworking.
Don't you shake your head at me, Matthew. You're the one who always makes the bad puns. Yep. I'm dipping my toes in the water. I need support here.
Yep.
Yeah, but they're literally dying. You take your timing.
Anyways, like I say, you can kind of imagine it to the Romans coming to the Celts if you want. It's not really like that, but like it's sort of close. So anyway, you've got another huge war. The Andals won, fought the first men completely out of southern Westeros, right the way to a part of land known as the Neck, which is a very small region which kind of separates the north of Westeros from the south. And the first men eventually managed to stop them here after losing like pretty much all of their lands. And they finally held them off, and they reached peace between the Andals and the first men.
Westeros, what is it? Winterfell never falls.
Yeah, exactly. The North didn't fall to the Andals, basically. That's the key part here.
Nice.
And yeah, but the Andals were kind of content. They were like, they've stopped us here, but like we kind of just took over half of their whole continent. Yeah, this is fine. So they were kind of happy. And then the Andals, because they were heavily into their whole new religion, they broke and destroyed all of the special face trees in the south and killed them all. And
how dare you?
Yeah, all of the trees were gone. And this becomes a bit of a significant thing in the show because the descendants of the first men, they keep to that same religion throughout the show and everything. And it's kind of a whole recurring theme that whenever the Northerners go south, they don't do very well because their gods aren't watching over them. So rip every North character that goes south in the show ever. Just something bad will happen to them. And anyway, so peace is made. Some of the first men descendants are around in the south. Eventually, the Andals and the first men, they kind of come together. There's some interbreeding and some marriages, so the bloodlines will get a little bit skewed. But for the most part, you've got the North Kingdom is predominantly first men.
Can we just acknowledge that Guy's first reaction to inbreeding is hell yeah.
Not inbreeding, crossbreeding.
Interbreeding between the races,
okay.
not inbreeding.
I was gonna
We love no
hell-
racial disparity. We're all for all races.
Exactly.
True, I was just like, I thought Guy was into it.
Yeah. And anyway,
Fuck
like,
yeah,
it's-
inbreeding.
at
Hell yeah,
this
baby.
point-
Keep it in the
at this
keep it in
point,
the
it's-
family.
At this point, it's not too diverse because it's just
Incest is wincest.
it's basically just
Fuck this
white
show for
European-y
real.
people meeting slightly whiter, more European-y people, if that makes sense. But you know,
Ah, yeah. White people.
yeah. So anyway, yes. The thing that happens here is the kingdoms are made.
It's a good question, actually. I don't even think what ethnicity are the first men and the Andals?
You can kind of there is a little bit of inspiration, sort of going back to Celts and Romans in that sense. So you can kind of imagine the Andals as being more middle, middle European sort of Latin background, and then the first men being more Celtic, Scottish, Irish, that sort of thing.
Okay.
But in
and,
broad
you know,
strokes, white.
yeah, broad strokes, but slight
They're white,
differences.
but the first men are whiter.
Yeah, exactly.
You may be white, but I'm whiter.
yeah. Anyway, and then this is when the Great Kingdoms are formed during
For
this
the
kind of
North-
time
the North.
period. And there are 7 of these kingdoms, in fact. And they're all separate entities, ruled by separate royal families and kings, queens, etc. And some familiar names start popping up. There's the Starks.
You bet we're counting these down. Count
Yep.
Starks.
No, because they're not all around at this time. We're not
You
counting.
just said there were 7.
Well, yeah, but they're different names at this point. There's only some of the familiar names. We'll get to all the
Pranked.
familiar names soon.
Pranked.
So
I was
there's
gonna count them down.
there's lots of there's the Starks and the Arryns are the main ones that become a thing at this point in time, because they're some of the oldest ones. But anyway,
They're the North people, right?
yeah, the Starks are the North people, and the Arryns are the ones that are kind of they're the most north except the North, if that makes sense.
They're the southern North.
South North, yeah, they're the ones that are like just below that point. I mentioned the neck; they're like just below that point.
They're the smokes.
Yeah. So anyway, this is the way things stand
the
for
shoulders.
Yeah, the shoulders. It's funny actually because you could almost look at it like shoulders on the map. But anyway, so this is the way things stand for, once again, a few thousand years. There's the 7 kingdoms of the first men and the Andals, and one other faction who we'll mention them, but they don't really matter. The Ironborn, they're just kind of there as these shitty island people off to the side.
love
And
it.
they're not recognized as a kingdom. They're just kind of a faction. They're a bit above tribes, but they just live on this place called the Iron Islands, which is off the west coast of Westeros. They're basically just really annoying coastal raiders, and that's about it. They were never invaded by the Andals because the Andals just kind of couldn't be bothered.
They're like a county or duchy.
Yeah,
Not a kingdom.
yeah.
They're cool.
Exactly. And also, the borders are a little bit different. Once again, I won't spiel too much because it's not super important. So once again, then the next thing that happens, dragons happen.
What?
Stage 3.
Boy, howdy.
Dragons.
Yes,
we
we went from
Stage 1. Everyone lived in harmony and there were no men. Great stage. Stage 2. Men attacked. Bad stuff. Stage 3. Men and people got along, but ice people attacked. And then that was bad, and they split them up. Stage 4. Other men, less white but still white men attacked.
yeah.
They had different religion. And then stage 5 is dragons.
This continent's like a good bit of dough, just keeps getting
is,
folded
it
in on
is, it
itself.
Just you wait.
War, more war, invasion.
So anyway, like I say, Westeros has been invaded a lot of times. So once again, in the east, go figure, Essos is where everyone seems to come from. There is a new power rising called the Valyrians. These are a group of people that possess powerful spells, immense knowledge, great wealth and power, and of course, many, many dragons. And because they have magic and dragons, they pretty much instantly become the rulers of the Eastern continent because everyone's like, we can't fight them.
I too have all these things.
I'm glad that
Yes,
Burke
yeah.
is part of the Game of Thrones continent series.
What? America. Burke?
Burke.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
Burke.
yeah.
From How to Train Your Dragon.
It's funny because they're like kind of on a little separate island to the south of Essos. Anyway. So it could
They're
be
like
Burke.
dragons are like nuclear weapons. People rock up with one.
How does that
in Game of Thrones,
It's just-
especially the fully grown dragons are kind of depicted to be stupidly OP. Like they can just in one of the things I'm going to mention in the next part with all the dragons where they screw everything up, there's literally 3 dragons take on an entire... This is every single man we can muster from these 2 kingdoms, so like hundreds of thousands of soldiers, and 3 dragons just go, bye.
Yeah, but I imagine a man. What's a man gonna do?
Oh, exactly. But just to give you an idea of how, like, because, you know, sometimes you see in fantasy, it's like, yeah, the dragon's there, but if you've got, like, a few thousand men, they can shoot it down or whatever.
So on, like, a scale of simp to Chad, we have
why is
Skyrim
Chad down here?
Skyrim dragons as the simps, and the Chads are the Game of Thrones.
100%. 100%.
Cool,
That is a good comparison.
And Lord of the Ring, where are the Lord of the Ring dragons? I'd say they're like even above.
Yes and no, because you got to bear in mind in the Hobbit novel, Bard just shoots a regular old arrow from a regular old bow and it kills a dragon instantly. So like,
Wow, sick. Smaug was a simp, but all the others were good. He brings down all the other dragons.
And then there's Skyrim, where you've one dude with a sword can just brawl a dragon to death.
yeah, exactly.
And then How to Train Your Dragon.
Yeah.
Oh no, never mind. Yeah, simp. Actual simp
real
is How to Train
simps.
Your Dragon.
Yeah, because they literally, yeah.
But like, okay.
Holly should never hear this episode.
We'll getting into like the Valyrian people. Like they're the dragon people. They can control dragons.
Yeah.
But like, okay, and maybe you can clear this up for me because I've had some like they're immune to fire, right?
What?
No. Well, it's one of those things where this is a disparity between the show and the books. In the books and George R. R. Martin's written lore, Targaryens were never... Well, the Valyrians, the Targaryens, which I'll talk about them in a bit, but they're a family from the Valyrians.
I know them.
Yeah. You know the name. Holly talks
No, I know
about
that
them
because I know the white hair lady.
Yeah.
No. Yeah, has anyone else seen the
Captain America? I know that one.
Yeah, that reference or the Leonardo DiCaprio meme where he leans forward and points at the screen. I just want everyone to listening to know, guys leaning back in his chair. Here's the name, leans forward and points at the camera.
You know, once we have a Patreon, I can put all the recordings up of these episodes. I record all of them.
I look terrible.
Anyway, I'll keep going. So yeah, Matt, in the books, they were never meant to be... It was kind of depicted that they could maybe give themselves a bit of an immunity because they were meant to be really powerful sorcerers and magic users back in their day.
Yeah.
But in the books, they were never meant to be immune to fire. That was just kind of a thing they introduced in the show to add a little bit more mystery and everything.
Okay, I just remember hearing that they had like dragon blood in them, and I don't know how does that happen? How do you get a dragon blood in you?
It's a bit, it's kind of one of those things. It's not meant in the books.
Did they mate with a dragon?
In the books, it's not meant to be a literal. They have the blood of the dragon. It was just meant to be the dragons are such an integral part to their family that they refer to themselves as the blood of the dragon. But then the TV show kind of went a bit of a step ahead and was like, this means they've got immunity to fire. Which, take what you will from that.
It looks cool. The scenes look cool.
Oh, yeah. It's one of those things. Like, there's some really cool... They use it really well in the show, but in the books, it was never meant... Like, the main white hair lady guy, Daenerys, she gets burnt all the time by things in the book, whereas in the show, she can just, like, touch anything hot and not get burnt at all.
She got mum hands.
Yeah.
But, like, isn't it just, like... Well, but, like, they literally, one, they control dragons, and two, I know they have magic. They're sorcerers, right? They're, like, the only men we've seen that have magic.
Yep.
So... Anyway, well, I'll let you continue, but I'm just like...
Yeah.
They got that shit.
Once again, as I'll get to, there's a reason that Valyria is super mysterious and we don't know much about it. So anyway, they became the ruler of the East because no one can fight people with magic and dragons, go figure. And
I think one of those you got...
That's kind of a royal flush sort of hand.
It is.
That's like... That's like bringing 2 guns to a knife fight.
Yeah. That's like someone pulls out a penknife and you fucking...
You got 2 Uzis.
I bought 2 guns to this knife fight.
One was enough.
You bring a knife to a gunfight. It's a classic saying. And someone's like, well, I've got 2 guns to a knife fight.
Why do you need 2? That's the question. It's irrelevant.
That's so good.
Anyway. They I won't say too much on these guys because like Matt's asking a lot of questions already. They're a big can of worms to open. No, it's good. It's because they're a big can of worms to open.
You always ask a lot of questions.
The first effect that they have on Westeros before they themselves come over is a group of people called the Rhoynar, who
The Rona?
Rhoynar, I don't know, I can't
The
pronounce
Corona?
it well. No.
Corona?
The Corona?
And they flee west from the Valyrians because, go figure, they want to fucking escape that shit.
Oh yeah.
And they land in southern Westeros, and they become the ancestors of the Dornish, who are a southern kingdom in the modern world.
We love it.
And eventually they became peaceful with the other men, the Andals and the First Men, and they interbred, married with...
I like how we say eventually, because we know there's a little bit of
Yeah, well, they actually, because I believe, once again, there's not many accounts on it, but I believe it's kind of shown they come over remarkably peacefully because they're just so desperate to escape from what they were, because they were, they just watched their entire continent get swept under the rug by these dragon fucking magic wielding crazy people. So they're like, yep, we'll do whatever you want. We'll bend over. And they literally just like completely abandon their old religion and adapt to the new religions. They just completely go, yep, we're you now.
Okay.
Also,
Yeah.
Also, I love how guys questioning me, asking questions. The whole point of this podcast
No,
is to
it's a
ask
dude.
questions.
It's just the
goof,
fact that we're trying, like, we'll get through like 2 minutes of actual lore and script, and you'll be like, how about this can of worms? And it's like, fuck.
Yeah.
I like worms.
Please,
and sometimes they're in
listen,
cans.
we're all early birds.
Matt, come on.
All
I'm
early
trying to
birds.
talk now. Let me get through this chunk of stuff. So then the dragons really happened big time. The Targaryens, which, yes, you've heard this name, Guy, and other people might have as well. They came along, so they're a family from the Valyrians, and you guessed it, they came from the east. So while there was Valyria, which is their main homeland, this family called Targaryens, they decided to head west and see what was there, and they found a small island that would later on become Dragonstone, or become known as Dragonstone, and they began building a fortress there, but it was a little bit shit, so they didn't really bring more of their people. They were just sort of like, oh yeah, this is a place we can go, and then they thought they might check out more of the western lands. But then while they were
They
there...
built a holiday house.
Yeah, literally, because they were super rich rulers of a continent,
Fuck yeah, dude.
They went over there, they brought a couple of their dragons on the journey,
I brought my corgis with me.
Yep, they were there, and then while they were there, Valyria literally exploded.
What the fuck? Excuse me? Pardon?
It is referred to in the lore as the Doom, and it's literally just the entire southern east area of Valyria just exploded, and the Targaryens happened to be the only ones to survive because they were away in this new island.
Didn't like one of the ancestors saw like a vision of it exploding? That's why they left.
Yeah,
or some shit?
yeah. It was there's like I say, I'm not going to get too into the can of worms. There's a lot of it. But yeah, they happened to not be there when it exploded. And
that's like the most sus thing ever, though. Like,
there are a few theories. One is that the kind of main, this is technically not confirmed, but it's accepted as this is what happened. Is that there was a volcano underneath Valyria that erupted. And then, you can kind of draw well from that. Some people in the canon and everything believe it's because they did too much sorcery and the dragons and everything caused the volcano to erupt. But anyway,
I was going to say,
too much fire magic.
Well,
Fire magic, you're gonna get
also
burned.
that volcano, like fucking dragons that
Yeah.
kill like many people. Like it can't just be a volcano. It's got to be something extra. Whether it's a super volcano or a what the fuck is that thing where Stardew
what?
Implode?
Yeah, there's a better word for it, but yeah, like an implosion where it just like.
Oh
like
yeah,
swallows the whole thing.
Yeah. Anyway, so
Too much fire magic, you're gonna get burned. That's all I'm saying.
Fair.
Yeah,
You're gonna get exploded.
It's one
Literal
of those things
Icarus.
because it explodes. There's no written lore or anything left from Valyria. It is just a complete ruined wasteland now.
Do the names white hair?
Daenerys.
Do they know
Targaryens.
do they know their history?
They know a bit about it, but not a lot, because go figure, when you go to like settle on a new island, you don't bring your entire, like if
Collection.
Australian colonists, when the British colonists came to Australia, they didn't bring the entire collection of British history with them.
So they've got like what I would if I went to
Yeah,
England and
exactly.
Australia exploded. Like, oh, okay, Captain Cook came, and then there was like some settlers and convicts,
and that's
then
everything.
no,
And the
it's
other thing as well, it's highly believed / highly likely that everything we know about Valyria is, what's the word? Exaggerated, because the only people that know anything about Valyria are the people that they enslaved and slaughtered with dragons and magic.
Sick.
And the people that escaped and the only ancestors. So you can kind of see how there'd be a lot of stories made up that may not be true. But anyway, so Valyria exploded. The Targaryens were the only people to escape. They had dragons. That was about it. These were the only dragons left, because the rest of them died during the fall of Valyria.
Big rip.
Yep, big rip. And there were a few other Valyrians that escaped, but none of them had dragons with them. And because they were stripped of their dragons and their magic, supposedly, they just kind of took into civil war with each other because they just kind of angry and stuff, I guess. I don't know. There's not much information on it. Anyway, yeah.
Power struggle, you mean?
Yeah. So, instead of a mighty civilization with huge unbeatable armies, hundreds of dragons, magic users, and mighty technology, the Valyrian people lived on as this tiny little family with a tiny little army. But they had a few dragons, which was a pretty big step up for anyone else in the world.
Fucking need.
They've got one gun still, you know.
Oh god, it's like a country explodes and the embassy is there, and it's like, oh, we're just the embassy, we're all that's left. We do have some nukes though.
Yo, we only have.
We only have 3 nukes.
There's 5 of us, but we do have. 3
We only escaped with 5 nukes of our own.
We could blow up half the world.
We used to have 100 nukes per person. Now we've only got 1.
Yeah.
Everyone else is like,
So anyway, yeah.
What am I gonna do with this nuke?
As people do with nukes, about a century passed where the Targaryens were biding their time on this little island they had. They built up fortress, and yeah, this fortress known as Dragonstone, which is a pretty big part of the show and the TV and the books and everything. There's this big, massive island fortress.
Oh no, guy has a question.
Because I'm wondering. You mentioned like on a lot of these things where it's like building the wall, building the castles and stuff like that. Like, is there any details on how that happens? Because
surprisingly or unsurprisingly little.
Yeah, I'm not surprised by that because I'm thinking like, surely they have to have. Well, I don't think they would have hired people, but maybe they captured people. Like, are they slaves? Like, what's going on?
Well, yeah, they had quite a lot of people with them because, like I say, one small family. They did have like quite a lot of soldiers and everything with them.
That makes sense.
And they literally spent like a century building this place up.
Yeah.
So they've got, like we say, people, what seems to be humans' only power. And they've got that over 100 years.
And if you have like an invading power of army and it's like, oh, we're not invading anymore, you guys can just help us build shit, like it'll just turn into a town at that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and there's like people don't write down how they built something, right? A lot of the time people don't write that down. Nowadays, yes, of course they would, because we've
you have to
everything.
submit plans to the council, my man. I mean, the Egyptians didn't, which was kind of a shitter because everyone's confused about their thing.
Exactly, that was what I was going to point out. Like, history, we don't know how a lot of things were built now. So,
we have suspicions, though. It wasn't like there were 3 dudes there and then all of a sudden the pyramid appeared. Like, there were a lot of slaves and other people.
Anyway.
we all know that pyramids were aliens, guys.
Yes,
correct.
So anyway, about a century past, they built up this fortress, and then before long, one of the Targaryens, known as Aegon, with his 2 sister wives. Yes, Targaryens were weird like that.
Sister wives.
Nice.
The guy loves that.
Yep, he does. And they had 3 dragons, 1 dragon each for the siblings.
Oh, that's so cute.
Yep. And then with their tiny little army and their 3 dragons, they conquered Westeros
Oh, sick.
in what would be known as Aegon's Conquest, which honestly, some really whack shit happens here, including one of my favorite parts is just this tiny little force of men against, because you got to bear in mind, Westeros is a kingdom with like into the millions of population, right? With like huge castles and huge armies. Each kingdom can, because there's like these 7 different kingdoms, and each of them can fairly easily field an army of like hundreds of thousands when they really need to. And you've got this king from Aegon who just lands on this tiny little part of land and goes, "Hey, I'm king now of this whole thing, this massive continent with millions of people. I'm the king now." And all of the nearby kingdoms were just like, there was this really weird confusion where he picked the part of land where he picked to land with, which it becomes the capital. They start building a town there, and it becomes the capital called King's Landing. But we'll get to that later. He starts building this city here, and he just lands with this little group of men, starts building a city, and because of where he lands, it's kind of at an awkward between two other kingdoms. So the two nearby kingdoms are like, well, you can fight him first. Well, you can fight him first. You can go first. And so that's why he has a lot of time just to build this little landing site of his, because no one wants to be the first to fight him. But then, one by
Question.
that... Mm-hmm.
How big is the dragon? Because dragons different sizes and different
At this
mediums.
point, pretty huge, because they are dragons that survived Valyria, so they're very old.
Yeah, but that's not an answer. Like 2 buses, 3 buses.
Well, you go off some accounts, you could probably put Balerion the Dread, which is like Aegon's big matte black dragon. Was, I believe, George R. R. Martin said you could compare to like a jumbo jet size.
Ooh,
That's
sick.
pretty big.
Yeah,
That's pretty big.
Yeah. When you consider like the tough hide that can't be pierced by any weapons that men have and breathe fire and shit. Yeah, you see why he just.
I think
You see why people were like, well, you can fight him first.
yeah, we
wanna
want
go near that.
You won at that point.
And then eventually, one by one, all of the kingdoms either got defeated or bent the knee to the Targaryen king, and then
the knee.
7 kingdoms became one kingdom ruled by
They
one
married
king.
him.
Yeah, one of them did actually. That's how they got in.
Well, they did it. I was like,
Yeah.
just bent the knee.
No, the I'll talk about them in a sec. But fun aside here, which I think Guy will really appreciate. So House Arryn of the Vale, which I mentioned, House Arryn's one of the really old houses. They were one of the last kingdoms to fall to the Targaryens because they have this like mountainous area. So they were already armed, had this huge army, really defensible mountain range. But the king at the time was a boy king. Tiny little kid that had gotten into the crown. And he saw the dragons and surrendered in exchange for a chance to ride on the dragon.
You're fucking shitting me.
Nope, this is the
That-
law.
My dude.
He's like, looks at his army, looks at theirs. I'll surrender if.
I mean,
that's real
the
cute.
correct
They
thing
give
to
him a
do.
ride.
There's always these things of like
Yeah.
angsty boy kings
Yeah,
where it's like, this young child is so burdened by the position that he holds. His mind is tormented by the responsibility of this nation. This is how a boy king should act. Boy kings are raised with a lot of money, so they're shitheads. I've met rich kids before. They're all shitheads. They have no responsibility. They have no concept of what they're talking about. It's like, oh, they are so wealthy and no, shut up. They're powerful, therefore they've never had to worry about anything. They have no concept of this. He's looked at it, gone, that thing's gonna fucking step on my castle. I do have a bunch of dudes there, so they could do a bit of damage, but I'm more likely to lose this. So I'm going to surrender because I don't want my people to die and I don't want my castle to get squished on. But I'm going to get the fuck what I want. I'm going to get right on that fucking dragon.
Exactly.
I wanna ride on
it's
that
great. It's great.
Realistic boy king. I like it.
And then the final one of the 7 kingdoms, Dawn, which I mentioned before, the kind of most south one, who their ancestors were the people that tried to escape the dragons. They're like, they're fucking come back. Flashbacks.
They're here.
And they never got defeated. They actually managed to beat the Targaryens because the Targaryens tried to come south.
We did it.
But because the defining trait of Dawn is that the middle of it is all desert, they basically just dispersed their people into the desert mountains and hills and fought guerrilla warfare. And the Targaryens were like, well, we can't fight this. So they just
They did a Vietnam.
yeah, literally. So they just gave up and didn't conquer Dawn and just went
In the
back to
desert?
It's desert jungle.
Close enough.
Okay, right. I was going to say, because desert don't do too good for digging tunnels,
No,
as far as I'm aware.
Anyway, so
you know
then eventually about, I think it's only like 500 years before the start of the show/books, that's when Dawn joins the 7 Kingdoms because they marry into the Targaryen family. Which is interesting when you consider that all of this history is happening over the course of like thousands of years. When you consider how recently one of
That's
the
real
kingdoms
recent,
have joined in the grand scheme of things, it's like, okay.
Yeah, so I like how the king is like has 2 sister wives. Like that's a 3-way relationship. That is really progressive, but also if you take out the incest.
I was gonna say,
If you
don't
take
forget
it- if you
about the
take out-
incest
We're
there,
all
boys.
take out the
this podcast. I am staking this claim now. This podcast is for polygamous relationships, but we are not for incest.
we literally did said incest is Wincest before, but
That's fair.
Oh boy.
you do what you want to do.
Yeah.
Don't break
In
the
your
law.
own home.
Yeah.
Don't break the. No,
Yeah.
we're not supporting incest. Don't.
So anyway,
Wait, so which castle, which group married into the Valerians?
the Dornish, so the people from the south.
So the Dornish did fall to the Valerians, but they fell in love.
Exactly.
Aw.
But because they fell in love rather than in warfare, it meant that they got to
They get that booty, baby.
They were never, they were never beaten in. So because of that, they got to maintain a lot of their independence / culture. And the thing that you'll know, Matt, anyone else that's read the book, seen the show, the Lord of Dawn, all the other kingdoms underneath the king, they're all referred to as the Lords. So, like the Starks, they're the Lords of the North, but the Dornish, they're referred to as the Prince of Dawn rather than the Lord of Dawn. But that's because they got to maintain semi-independence because they married in rather than getting beaten in. Just a fun little thing for you.
They got to stake claims.
Yeah,
They got to
exactly,
stake
exactly. They
terms of
literally
this.
they had some form of bargaining chip rather than just we surrender, simp. You know,
We're going back to Keys to the Kingdom. We've got Lord Dawn.
we do, we do.
No,
We do.
It's not spelt the same. Dawn is spelt Dorne.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
What?
If
Yeah.
this Dawn is
Okay.
Yeah, it's not Dawn.
yeah.
I-
Anyway, it is
Okay.
fine. It's fine. So that's kind of when the Seven Kingdoms become a thing underneath the One King. This is when it becomes the modern Westeros.
Is it time for the countdown?
Yes. So into
Let's do it.
into the modern times of the book / show, the regions of Westeros. So you can ignore this one. This is the king / queen. They rule from a city called King's Landing, which is a province of the Crown Lands, which is basically just a little area of land which just provides the main capital with enough farmland to support the capital city, if that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So we got the Australian Capital Territory.
Yep. You put
Canberra.
Matt,
We
put
got
two.
Canberra.
Matt, put 2 more fingers up,
Wait, what?
and then put
9?
Yep, and then take 1 down for the Crown Lands. Yep.
We had 8 up
You'll see,
before, and
you'll
we
see.
put 1 down, so we've missed one.
Okay.
No,
We got
we're
8
up
fingers.
to 8 now, up to 8.
We got 8
No,
fingers
no,
up.
we
now.
had 8 up before, and then we put 1 down to go to
Yeah,
7.
yeah,
So
yeah,
we're
yeah,
putting
yeah.
so down to 8.
Yeah. So then you've
Okay.
got the North, which is the North region, and it is ruled by the family the Starks from the city of Winterfell.
Love 'em.
And the North is all the First Men, pretty much still. That's the strongest bloodline. The First Men is up in the North.
Tree
That makes
boys.
sense.
Yep, and then you've got the Reach, which
Tree
is
boys.
Tree boys. No,
Tree
they
simps.
do worship the trees still, so yep, still tree simps. Then you've got the Reach, which is ruled by House Tyrell from the
Wait,
city.
sorry, wait. This is the Reach?
Yep, the Reach.
The Reach.
Yep, and ruled from the city of Highgarden. And then you've got the Westerlands, which is ruled by the Lannisters from the city of Lannisport.
Nice.
Then you've got the Riverlands, which is run by House Tully from the city of Riverrun.
They got boats.
Yes.
Yep, they
Hell
kind of
yeah.
do. The more boaty people are coming. And then you've got the Vale of Arryn, which is the mountainy area, which is
Was that the Boy King?
the Boy King. Yep,
Woo,
run
Boy King.
by House Arryn, and the from the main city of the Eyrie, which it's kind of a city, kind of not. But anyway, then you've got Dawn, which is run by House Martell, and the city of Sunspear, which is this really cool little south, super fucking Mediterranean-y city. And then the last, nearly the last one of the Great Houses.
We have 2 left.
Yes, I know. Is the Stormlands, which is run by House Baratheon, from the city of Storm's End.
What's this secret extra bad house?
And then the last one is not really a kingdom because they weren't one of the original kingdoms, but they're still referred to as a region in Westeros, and that is the Iron Islands, ruled by House Greyjoy.
Greyjoy.
Yep.
Hell yeah.
Yeah.
So did the dragon people bothered to go out to the islands and go, hey, you guys?
No,
Don't-
it's
just-
I'll talk. I might do another episode at one point on the Conquest because there's a lot of funny things that happen in the Conquest. Funnily
Hell
enough,
yes.
but
A lot of
one
funny things, like people burning alive.
Yeah, exactly. But the
It's fantasy. We can
Ironborn-
laugh at it.
The Riverlands, Matt, used to technically be owned by the Ironborn. House Tully didn't used to be a thing, so the Ironborn got beaten
okay.
in the Riverlands, and then they retreated to their islands after all their lords had been killed.
That makes
So that's,
sense.
yeah, and then the House Tully was made a thing by the Targaryens then. But
Okay.
anyway,
Which one of these boys are the boat boys? You mentioned there was boat boys
Greyjoy,
coming.
That was
because
it.
they're the
Greyjoy, the ones-
island people.
Gotcha. With you.
That's all. That's all countdown. That's the countdown done.
Yep.
But wait. Yeah. So Guy, before, so we're allowed to laugh because it's fantasy.
Yes.
So if it's not, when we do the if we do a history episode, we can't laugh. The entire thing has to be very
No.
serious. It's gonna be a very serious.
Well, that means we can't do a history episode because this is a comedy podcast and history isn't funny.
This is true.
history is never funny.
History's
Not funny.
never been funny ever.
It's
Not
never
even
funny.
that time that 3 popes excommunicated each
No.
other. That wasn't funny.
Yeah, not at all. Anyway,
You're the
So-
real. I'm the real.
we'll do some. I'll do some more dive into the actual political things of the world, just to tell you a little bit more about the world itself. So you've had a little bit of the background, and so just a little bit of overview. There is a single king, ruling over the 7 kingdoms, and the king sits on the Iron Throne in the Crown Lands and technically rules everything.
Ooh, everyone's
You
heard of
say
the
single
Iron
king,
Throne.
is he a bachelor?
No. As opposed, because it's always referred to as the 7 kingdoms, but there's only
Oh,
one king.
right.
Guys like he's single.
How's he looking?
Well, I mean,
So he's
some
not
of them
a-
are.
he's-
Technically, some of them are, but anyway.
He's not a bachelor. He's
No,
just the supreme.
Yeah,
lord.
yeah. So it was.
He's Chi Supreme.
So the 7 Kingdoms was ruled
even
as an absolute monarchy, by someone who would bear the title of King of the Andals and the First Men, Lord of the 7 Kingdoms, and Protector of the Realm. And then
But not the children of the forest.
No. Well, they're dead.
Oh. And the giants also dead.
They're believed dead. Yes. In reality,
So they did. So, yeah, keep going.
in reality, the giants are north of the wall, but yeah, all the giants south of the wall have disappeared by this point.
Okay. I was gonna say. So far they did nothing and died.
Well, they helped the
sad.
children fight, to be fair, and they probably would have been a big nuisance for the first men to fight. But
And
anyway,
I'm sure they helped build like the giant wall.
That actually
Probably.
makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
There you go.
Then the second most powerful position in the world from a political standpoint is the Hand of the King, who is an appointed lord who basically just serves as the monarch's topmost advisor. They're basically like the king's admin person. Yeah, it's kind of a thing also, because especially like you were saying, Guy, all the rich people are just kind of massive pricks with power. It really does, especially George is very aware of that when he writes his books. Most of the kings, especially once they get a decent amount of time as king, become complete shitbags. And by the time of the show, one of the Baratheons sits on the throne. And when he got the throne, he was like this super noble, amazing, mighty warrior, one of the best warriors that the world's ever seen. By the time of the show, so like 12 years after he got the throne, he's this terrible joke-making, stinky fat boy who just laughs all day and does shit all.
Stinky fat boy.
Literally.
It's not a bad way to describe him. That's the sad part.
Exactly. And there's a saying, which I think you'll appreciate, Guy, just to going back to the whole shitbag thing of Rich King. There's a saying: the king shits and the hand wipes. As in the hand of the king, because they just have to. The monarch will just be a complete shitbag, and the hand of the king has to do everything.
Yet more simps. This fucking
Yeah,
episode's
yeah.
full of them.
It is. Well, isn't that
Nothing
just
wrong with the
that's just
simp.
that's literally the basis of the feudal system? Simps. When you think about it.
that needs to be. We put that on a shirt.
Put that as the subtitle of this podcast.
The basis of the fetal system is Sims.
Yeah. Aiding.
I will conquest for you, king.
Literally. I will become a knight.
I will not.
Yeah.
Oh fuck.
Anyway, so aiding the king and the hand of the king in the capital is a group called the Small Council, which is a chamber of lords that advise the king and hand in matters such as economy, intelligence, law, etc.
How small are these
small council, it's
on a scale to 1 to 10?
there's only a few positions. So there's the Master of Laws. All their names are pretty self-explanatory. So you've got the Master
That's
of
us.
Laws,
We're the master of laws.
the other kind
We're
of
the
law,
law.
the other kind of law. You've got the Master of
Boring.
Coin, you've got the Master of Ships, the Master of War, the Master of Whisperers, the the Grand Maester, which is kind of like a healery sort of position, and then the Lord Commander of the King's Guard. And those are all the positions.
I'm
Hey, baby king, let me whisper in your ear.
Come up on close and tell you about this thing. You should kill that guy.
He's
talking
the master of whispers is always like the spy master. So, like, think like the boss of James Bond.
You guys heard about my new boat?
Get out of here, boat.
We don't care about your coin, your boat, your war. It's the master.
I do this.
Oh my god, it's the master of ASMR.
You know the worst thing as well, Matt. I'm just picturing the actor of Varys doing ASMR now.
He probably is. The master of whispers.
Oh god.
That's a cool ASMR name.
Yeah.
Can I also
the
say,
master of whispers.
yet another visual gag that will go unappreciated in this audio medium is the fact that as soon as Jude said the name Master of Whispers, both Matt and I got way up on the microphone, waited for him to finish speaking, and then started that goof simultaneously.
Yeah. Anyway, so I'll keep going.
We were ready.
The king / queen or whatever, they may appoint other advisors into the council at their discretion, but they hold no official title or office. They're just kind of a temporary position. So if you've got a monarch who really heavily depends on a particular person for something, they can appoint them to the council for a bit of time, but they don't really hold an official position.
I do like how, back in the day, the ships were so important, they had to have one guy just to look after
Yeah,
them.
exactly. So beneath the king,
I am the master of the ships.
beneath the king, but still enjoying a great degree of autonomy, are the rulers of each of the regions, which we've mentioned before, all of those regions. And these guys are referred to as the Lords Paramount of their respective regions, so Lord Paramount of the North, etc. These Lord Paramounts are the paternal heads of the great houses, and each great house rules a region. So you've got the Lord of the Starks would be the Lord Paramount of the North, for example.
So
Additionally, some of these Lords Paramount bear the title of Warden, who are regional commanders sworn to defend the realm from threats posed in and around their region. So you've got a warden of the north, a warden of the south, east, etc. You get the idea.
So the wardens on each edge of the
Yeah,
kingdom.
exactly.
The ones in the middles are chilling.
Yeah. So the warden the warden of the north and east are the only really important ones, because in the north you've got the wildlings.
What's west of Westeros?
In the north, you've got the barbarians who come down to raid, so the Warden of the North has to be there to stop them. And then the Warden of the East, because you occasionally get people trying to raid them from the East Kingdom, Essos. So the other ones don't really have all that much to do, but whatever, they're there. So below the rulers of each of these regions, so below the great houses, lie their vassals, which are lords and landed knights, so knights who have been given land to rule over. And they rule in the name of their liege lords, the great houses, and sworn to answer their summons when the need arises. So these lords may have, in turn, their own lands, sworn knights. So it's basically, think like a business structure. The great house is the CEO, and then below them you've got the head of the departments, and then below them they've got their departments, and then they might have admin leaders in those departments, if that makes sense.
And some managers, yeah.
Yeah,
I was
exactly,
genuinely about to say, so they're the managers of these.
Yeah,
little
literally.
areas.
And it's one of those. So you might have House Stark, who are the ones in the north. I'm just gonna keep interrupting Matt because you've got the Starks in the north, and then you've got another house called House Umber, who is one of the northern houses. They are they're directly underneath House Stark, but then you've also got more houses which are beneath House Umber, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll move on.
Different levels of power.
Yeah,
It's a
exactly.
nice, neat
exactly.
structure.
And it's just to deal with the fact that the Westeros as a kingdom is a very huge place, so they need lots of people to manage this area.
Yeah.
And then,
sense.
other than these guys, the lowest tier of the social ladder are the small folk or commoners, who just make up the majority of the population.
Just chilling.
So then, in the Seven Kingdoms, we'll move on to justice, which is administered by the king and or lords. Penalties for crimes go from a lot of different things. They may include mutilation, castration, excessive tickling, or imprisonment.
Pardon?
Yep. Are we going to make no comment there and keep going?
I want to make comment.
South of the neck, so as I
I
mentioned,
would definitely get arrested for that.
excessive tickling.
Tickling.
But
yeah.
what if they do one of the
the
other
punishment
things?
is
What?
No, they're saying the
Oh,
punishment
that's a punishment?
is... Yeah.
Oh, that's great. What? I'll get that.
Have you been tickled excessively before? You've been tickled for sure. You haven't been
What's
tickled
excessive,
excessively.
though?
Excessive.
Like strapped down and tickled for like an hour on end.
Okay, that's actually not okay. That's worse than all the others. That's the worst one.
How you do castration? Fuck yeah! Cut my balls off.
I'd rather
Don't
that.
tickle me though.
Yeah,
Fuck, an
yeah.
hour long? Fuck.
I don't know.
I hate this show.
Yeah. Anyway. So south of the neck, as I mentioned, the neck being like the division between the north and the south. So in the south, where you've got the Andal culture, because they're much more knight and chivalry based. The punishments are carried out by a headsman or an executioner by a lord. So the lord will go, "Bring me his head," and the headsman's like, "Yes, my lord," and cuts it off. Whereas in the north, where it's the first men, it's very much the expected thing that lords carry out their own sentences. So if you swing the sentence, you've got to swing the sword. Is kind of the saying.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
And it's a big fucking sword.
It is. There's a reason that the Lord of the North has a huge fucking sword, because it's meant to be an executioner's sword as well.
Did the Long Night leave that behind?
Yes, he did.
By the long night, he was N-I-G-H-T guy. It wasn't K on the
You
end.
missed it. There's a silent K at the front.
No, guy. The long night was a night. It's like a winter, like there was no summer, no day.
I'm sure he
knows,
had
he's
armor.
goofy,
He's
he's
fine.
I hate you so much, guy.
So anyway, so treason and rebellion may be punished in several ways, such as hanging or beheading, but also by being exiled or stripped of all lands and titles, which may also extend to the entire family. So if your dad rebels, it might mean that the whole family is removed as a family, or it might just mean he is. Who knows?
Seems fair.
Yeah, exactly.
Mom, Dad won't stop rebelling against the kingdom.
I don't want to lose my richness.
I don't want to lose my dragon riding privileges.
So anyway, then slavery or slave trading is also forbidden and punishable by death. Thieving and smuggling are usually punished by mutilation, which is the amputation of a hand in this case.
Makes sense.
Rapists are subject to castration. It's fairly kind of, you get what you get,
That's fair.
What you do, that's what they cut off or whatever. You get the idea. So bearing arms against a liege lord or refusing to answer a liege lord's summons is also considered punishable by death. So if you're underneath House Stark and they rally all of their banners and you go, no, then they're gonna go, okay, we'll take your head. And that's
I'm just comfy in bed. I don't want to get up.
that. Yeah, literally.
I'm thinking like, hey, what if you're on the battlefield and you run and turn away, and that's the crime of
Desertion.
cowardice or whatever the fuck, desertion. Yeah,
Desertion.
is that when you get tickled because you got bad feet? You got bad feet, they need to be punished. You nasty boy.
I mean, I'll be honest.
You strap down, they tickle your
that is
feet.
actually, I really need to find.
I was trying to think because hands for stealing, balls for
yeah.
rape,
They
eyes for peering and secrecy or
You know what,
spying,
guy?
whatever.
Yeah.
They come
But-
out with the baseball bat and they bust your kneecaps. You
They're
know?
gonna get you fucking.
I'm gonna fucking bust your
No,
kneecaps. You're not
honestly,
gonna be running away any longer.
Based on what's seen in the show, people that desert are usually just hanged, and that's it.
That makes sense. I mean,
yeah,
you don't deserve the air in your lungs.
yeah,
man.
yeah, exactly.
No, we're gonna bust
So,
your kneecaps.
so
Shut.
suspects of crime are judged by the lords or the king himself. Parties may invoke a trial by combat to prove justice. So if you're about to be sent to jail because the king is in charge of the justice ultimately, or the lord, depending where you are. But if you decide you're innocent and the king's found you guilty, you can demand a trial by combat.
If you decide, I will decide I'm innocent.
Exactly. Which, it's a little bit of a flawed system, because if you're the best fighter in Westeros, you could, in theory, get away with anything.
Hey, you're letting the gods decide.
It's
Yeah.
one of those things. There's that 4chan post about like, hey, do you want to buy a tank? Take out a loan and then don't pay it back. And it's like, well, the bank's gonna come for me. It's like, you have a tank. You'll be
Yeah,
fine.
exactly. And then, the victorious party is held to have been judged right by the gods. As Matt said, that is the thing in the show where if they demand a trial by combat, they're basically saying the gods will decide their fate, because if they win the trial, the gods have decided they're innocent.
It's gotta suck to be the
Yep.
guy who just like representing the law. Like
Yeah,
I'm just a
yeah,
police
yeah,
officer, and
yeah,
you
yeah.
lose. You're like, I didn't do anything. I'm just here to represent the
Yeah,
law.
yeah. But you do also take a bit of a gamble because especially when you're challenging a lord or the king in trial by
They
combat,
usually have the good people.
they can fight themselves, but generally it's expected that they name a champion because you don't want to risk the lord or a king in a trial by combat, you know. Because you got to bear in
That
mind
would be so sick, though.
The boy king steps down.
There are
Will the
literal
fucking go-
people in this universe that die because they get a cut that gets infected and then they're just dead.
Oh yeah, medicine's not.
Yeah, exactly. So it's
Oh yeah, we're
it's-
in medi. We may have magic and dragons, but we don't have basic
Magic's rare.
medicine.
No, magic's
there's no
rare.
magic.
That's-
There's no magic in this kingdom.
Where'd the magic go? We did have some.
You've seen the show, Matt. There's no magic in Westeros.
Yeah, but where'd it go?
It's just not. These people never had it. The Andals,
They went-
the First Men, they didn't never had it. So yeah,
The North went.
exactly.
North
Exactly. So one thing as well, any criminal, however, may elect to join the Night's Watch to avoid the punishment. So as I mentioned, the group to the north who defend the wall, and those who choose to take the black,
Oh, the
as it's
Night's
called.
Watch.
Yeah.
What are
They
you thinking? What'd you...
I thought because in my mind it was like, oh, you've been held up on drug possession charges.
Oh, you took the knights.
You-
the
no,
knights.
no. I thought it was like, oh, you've been held up on drug possession charges. How do you plead? I'd like to join the police, thanks.
Yeah.
But no, it's more like I want to become like
These-
like a
Yeah, as I'll mention them a
like
little bit
working
later.
on an oil rigger or something
Basically,
similar.
Water
because
guard.
they're
Being super exiled
when-
and doing an important
yeah,
job.
They have to live in the super
Is an
isolated
oil rig an
north.
important job?
Matt,
Are you
They-
shitting me, man?
they have to live up in the super isolated north. They have to make an oath to, father no children, hold no lands. They basically give up who they are. They lose their name and everything and just become one of the Night's Watch.
Which some people would do for pledging to the kingdom, but these people are doing
Exactly.
instead of dying or being
Exactly.
fucked up.
And that's the thing with the Night's Watch. Back in when it was first founded, it was seen as this great honor to join the Night's Watch because people were
Right.
still aware of how scary the White Walkers were. But into the modern age, where it's been thousands of years and no one even believes the White Walkers existed, it's the entire Night's Watch is just run by criminals at this point because it's
all
just
the
more or
fuck,
less,
It's all the fuck ups.
it
More or
literally
less
is.
a tradition than anything else.
Yeah, even then, most of the people that join through tradition, there's like maybe 2 of them, and the rest of them are literally just cutthroats, rapists, murderers who are just like, I don't want to go to jail or lose a hand. I'm going to join the Night's Watch.
Just to get rid of misfit people. It's like Australia. You just send them over there.
Literally, literally.
Vouch to change the name of Night's Watch to the Rowdy Boys.
Yeah, definitely.
No, we should change our name to that.
Anyway, so with and the other thing as well of the Night's Watch, if you choose to go to the Night's Watch and then you try to escape, you get punished by death, and there's nothing you can do at that point.
Are women put
I
into
would like
the
to
Night's
join
Watch
the
ever?
Night's Watch again.
I don't actually off the top of my head, I do not believe they are, which is interesting.
Okay. Just a
When
thought.
you consider that, yeah, that's
It's
true,
a
actually,
boys'
yeah.
club.
Yeah, it kind
Boys
of is.
only.
Yeah.
Well, because I said the Rowdy Boys, and I was like, well, man, maybe I'm
think-
being exclusionary.
I should have.
As we know, only males commit crimes.
I should have looked into this.
Only
I'm pretty sure.
Crimes with the boys.
I'm pretty sure there is a group who are sort of like traveling healers. I think they're like the sisters of something. I think that's kind of the female equivalent of the Night's Watch. You see them a lot.
So there is
during-
an
They're
option
the-
there.
They're the silly sisters.
No.
To the
You-
rowdy
you
boys.
What
get
the
them-
fuck?
You see them a lot during, especially like the middle seasons of Game of Thrones when there's a lot of war going on. You see these people kind of going around. They're just like a neutral force who come to the war and just heal people of both sides, if that makes sense.
Okay, that makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah, I
Kind of like
super don't quote me
Valkyries.
on that because I think it might be wrong, but I also might be
Nuns.
right. So anyway, I'll move on to more fun stuff. Wealth and trade, which is where you hear a little bit about like the actual thing of the different regions and what makes them cool.
okay.
So, first thing, monetary transactions in the Seven Kingdoms use a form of minted coin currency known as the Gold Dragon and its various denominations, the Silver Stag and the Copper Penny. The feudal system of the Seven Kingdoms has a primarily agrarian economy, so all based around agriculture and food, basically. And
Makes sense.
surplus food supports the population of the major cities and various large towns, because not all of the large cities can produce food for themselves. So the Reach and the Riverlands, we'll start with them. They are the two most fertile regions, which have such fertile and productive farmland. They not only meet their own local needs, but they export foodstuffs to the rest of the kingdoms. So they basically make all their money by selling food. And the Reach is also a major wine-producing region. And in particular, they contain an island called the Arbor, which is off the south coast of Westeros and is the main wine-producing hub for the entire realm, which is kind of cool. They basically produce all the wine as well as food, so yeah. Then you've got the Crown Lands, which is more or less lumped in with the Riverlands in this regard, because they're very close to the Riverlands, and they were created a long time ago when Aegon said, this area is the capital zone. So he very deliberately carved out a part of land that could be self-sustaining, if that makes sense. So the Crown Lands doesn't really have anything in particular that sets it apart. They just kind of have enough to maintain themselves. So the Reach and the Riverlands, as I say, they feed the realm, but the Westerlands, which is the Lannisters, they enrich it. They are the largest gold mines in Westeros, and indeed most of the precious metals and mines in the Seven Kingdoms are all concentrated there. So, yeah, they basically just, all of the precious metals and jewels come from the Westerlands, so that is why the Lannisters in particular are ridiculously rich in the show, because all of the gold basically comes from their land. And they use this gold to trade with the Reach and the Riverlands, because they don't produce any... They do not... they basically have no fertile land in their entire Westerlands kingdom area. So they basically depend on their export of gold and stuff to get in food from the Reach and the Riverlands. So, yeah, the circle goes round and round, you know.
Fair enough.
Yeah.
It does. Yeah, it does make sense. Like
Yeah.
you have one region that's got a bunch of. It's like it just doesn't. They can't grow crops, so they have a bunch of money, and the other kingdoms obviously need metal to make their armor.
Yeah,
and stuff
exactly,
like that,
exactly.
so-
It's a proper capitalist system.
Exactly.
We love capital.
Yes. Then moving on, although agriculturally self-sufficient, the North has few exports and and a small population, surprisingly, but it is the main contribution to the overall... the main thing that it contributes is security, because everyone's kind of a bit scared of what comes from the North, because, you know, the North is very much where all of the children's tales of the realm come from, and while everyone thinks, oh yeah, giants and stuff, that's all just kids' tales, everyone's still a little bit scared of what could be up there, if that makes sense. So everyone's kind of quite happy that the North is there providing security. But because the North, which... I'll show you guys a map at some point. Anyone, like, it's, you know, go figure, Game of Thrones is huge. If you just Google Westeros map, you'll get a massive map of it. The North is by far the biggest, because it's just this huge area, but it's also the, like, least dense population because of how sparse it is. So that's why they're able to be fully self-sufficient from, like, a farming standpoint. And also because it is the North coldest region, it's believed, not necessarily confirmed, but believed that they export a lot of heavy furs and stuff, because not many other places have the animals to get heavy furs, because they don't have the North colder regions.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Are there where are the direwolves at?
They're meant to be north of the wall,
Okay, makes sense.
but the North, that kind of northern regions, basically. They're one of those things where they sort of lived around the whole area back in the olden days, but now with the wall up, they only really be on the north of the wall. Not much in the terms of what we know from the books. Not much is really said about the economic capabilities of the Stormlands and the Vale, though it's believed that parts of the Stormlands are fertile for farmland and everything. But the one thing the Stormlands do have is they are the most heavily forested region in all of the southern Westeros. So that's kind of their main thing. The Storm Lords and everything, they have a lot of wood. And they also, along with... Yeah, I said it.
yeah.
They got a lot of wood.
Yeah,
and
they do.
they use
wood.
Yeah, I shouldn't have said that.
Yeah, they're using all that wood.
Got that
Along
fucking pine wood.
How
Along
much
with
wood?
the Ironborn and they basically have one of the largest navies, is what I'm getting to, because of all the wood that they have.
Oh, that's cool. Actually.
Yeah, and they kind of have a little bit of land that's a bit islandy as well. So along with the Ironborn, they have the largest fleet. with the kind of the exception of the capital, because the capital can kind of take on a lot of people's boats, if that makes sense. It's one of those things where if the capital says, hey, we need those boats, it's kind of their boat now.
It's the FBI.
Yeah,
we need to accommodate this vehicle.
Yeah, literally. Anyway, so the Vale, while fairly mountainous, does not possess the precious metal reserves that the Westerlands have. However, the well-watered valleys of the Vale are actually quite fertile, because they're all like luscious valleys and everything. And the Vale can produce a sufficient amount of food to support its population, and it doesn't have to rely heavily on imported food. This contributes to the Vale's frequent tactic of choosing isolationism in times of political turmoil, and they just close off the mountains, because there's been a lot of times where the different houses have had quarrels with each other, and the king usually, often it involves the king, but if the king can, they like to try and avoid like the squabbles of lords and stuff, because it's like below them. And when political stuff happens, the Vale just kind of shuts its borders of mountains and goes, we're self-sufficient, we're just going to disappear for a bit.
Sweden?
Yeah, literally Sweden. Switzerland.
I thought it was Switzerland.
Switzerland.
I was about to say, it's just
Yeah.
Sweden? What is Sweden?
They're all countries, and they all
Anyway, so the
If
last...
They'll
everybody
make
would
good
watch,
furniture.
if anyone watching from Switzerland, they're going to be very insulted.
Now,
everyone
to-
who is listening, all of our audience in Switzerland,
Yeah,
I
yeah,
apologize profusely.
So getting into
Sweden.
the Magikarp of the kingdoms. Last and least, the Iron Islands are commonly referred to as a dead weight carried by the other kingdoms. They are lightly populated. They have infertile rocky islands. It is no wonder why their population turned to a lifestyle of piracy and raiding. They are swept by fierce, cold storm winds from the seas, with poor soil and hardly any natural resources. The few poor crop fields that are present have rocky soil ploughed by, captured men from raids and everything. So they basically have slave-worked fields, what they do have. They can't even really afford draft horses and everything. They're just really shit. And most of their economy... They do have a bit of fishing, which is something they've got going for them.
Nice.
But the funny thing is, it's one of those things where, like, there's two things the Iron Islands do have. They do have access to iron in some of their islands. Go figure, the Iron Islands.
That does make sense.
But it's one of those things of, like, yeah, you could get lots of iron from them, or you could go to the Lannisters, who are much easier to deal with, and you could get resources from them. Oh, okay.
You don't have to put on a boat, get across seas.
They're island people. They have lots of access to fish, and they do lots of fishing. Yeah, but you could deal with, like, the Stormlands, who also have lots of fishing, and they're kind of friendlier to deal with. So
That makes sense.
It's a bit shit. They kind of get screwed over a lot.
These are the kind of guys
So
who,
wait,
who kind of are on an island, and they would probably be better off just leaving their islands and just deserting
but
them.
that's-
But they're like,
there's-
I have land. I'm not leaving this fucking land.
someone's got to live
They
there.
they try to get independence from the kingdoms a bunch of times in history, and it always goes badly for them. But anyway,
Why?
fuck knows.
I am going to put myself in the middle of this fucking desert, and no one can stop me.
It's kind of one of those things that before the Targaryens conquered, the Ironborn were quite wealthy because they raided everyone else. So they were like,
makes
they
sense.
didn't bother
I
making.
was like,
But after the Targaryens came, it was the rules of the kingdom that they weren't allowed to raid fellow kingdoms for obvious reasons.
yeah.
So it basically means whenever they want to go raiding now, they have to sail all the way around the south of Westeros and go across to the other continent.
That's such
And
a
it's
rip.
just like, why?
There was there used to be the people like, we don't have good shit ourselves, but other people have good shit,
Yeah.
and we have they
And
will
now
take.
they're
We
not
have a
allowed.
very good way to take it.
Yeah.
The other question, so you say that they're part of the kingdom and they're the dead weight of the kingdom. Are they getting supplies there?
Yeah, they do get imports and stuff.
So they get freebies.
Yeah, well,
They get benefits.
yeah, it's
They're
kind of
on,
one of those things.
they're on the dole.
Yeah,
They're on
the
the
dole.
top. Aw.
So moving on to a little bit, I won't talk about too much, but a little bit of military stuff of this world. So the Seven Kingdoms does not possess a large standing military force, because go figure, it's expensive to pay soldiers. Better just to have them as
Yeah.
peasants that don't get paid.
Nice.
So as some of the other, so like to the east in Essos, you've got some different cities, and they have really large standing armies. But in the Seven Kingdoms, they don't really do that. Each lord maintains a small retinue of well-trained and well-equipped personal knights and warriors. But in wartime, they function on the principle of feudal levies, where each lord basically just goes, all of the commoners get pitchforks and gambeson, fight. Yeah.
You man, you will fight for me.
Yeah.
Because I can't know I own your land.
Yeah. It's yeah.
I could have quality soldiers, but I could only have a few of them. So the alternative is I just make a bunch of pitchforks and just give them to the peasants. And you know what they say, quantity over quality.
Well,
Exactly.
That's kind
I
of
could have-
especially the north because as I mentioned, the north is fairly sparsely populated in terms of how big they are, but even a sparsely populated north is still a much bigger population than other kingdoms. So when they go to war, they've got a huge amount of manpower. But then the Lannisters, they don't have a huge manpower, but because they own all of the mines, they can basically equip all of their soldiers with really good stuff. So it very much is
Just
like
give the peasant like armor and a
yeah,
great
no,
sword, something like
literally
that.
though. That's it's kind of it's literally a bit of a Germans versus Russians situation. But yeah,
Good shit.
The Russians
yeah,
are like,
yeah.
hey, they might have one really good man, but we have 100 men. How is that one man going to fight 100 men?
Hey, Lord, my lord, can I get a sword to go into fight? Pick up his when he dies. Okay.
If you all grab him at once, he has no chance.
Anyway, so yes, then each lord, as I say, they kind of raise a military force from their vassals and knights, which they fight on the behalf of the superior lord. These bannermen march underneath the banners, etc. And they combine all their strength. You get the idea.
Yeah, nice.
So then the king sits on the Iron Throne. He does appoint the wardens, who are meant to command and coordinate regional armies when in times of crisis. And when bannermen and levies are called up. The regional lords in that quarter of the realm are expected to put their armies at the overall command of the warden in their quarter of the realm. So, I think a good example could be like the Eyrie, how they're kind of a north sort of area, but they don't have one of the wardens there. So, in a time of crisis, they would be expected to put their army under the control of the warden of the north, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. Even though they're technically a separate region, but
Does that ever actually happen?
No. So the Seven Kingdom also has a large number of naval forces. As I mentioned, there's the 3 main fleets: the Capital, the Royal Fleet, the Stormlands Fleet, and the Ironborn. So then I'll just mention the main kind of important religions. I won't talk about them too much, but just a little bit. So the major religions that are followed by a large number of people in the Seven Kingdoms, by far the most dominant is the faith of the Seven, which is the one the Andals brought over, if you remember, the one that's told them to come over. Yes. Oh.
Faith of the Seven.
No.
That's us.
Yes. So the faith of the Seven, they basically believe that there is one God with 7 different aspects: the mother, the father, the warrior, the smith, and the maiden, and the crone, and the stranger. And people worship the 7 in 7-sided churches called septs, and are led in worship by priests and priestesses known as septons and septors. The faith is not only a belief system, but also an institution led by the High Septon from the Great Sept, which is in the capital, King's Landing. The faith has traditionally not been very tolerant of other religions, but this was relaxed a bit after they coexisted with other gods eventually.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah. And they're much
Like-
more of a constitutionalized religion than the others.
Christian, you see, like Christianity is monopolytheistic, which they have one God, but like it has different aspects. It has the Father, the Son, the Holy Spirit. So it's like 3 aspects of the one God. Is that
Yeah,
similar?
exactly. Yeah, kind of the Holy Trinity and everything.
Is it mono?
Yeah, it's a little bit
mono?
like it's.
They're
Yeah,
more separate entities, though.
more. They're kind of It's kind of halfway between that, where in Christianity you might be specifically referring to the Holy Spirit or Jesus or God. But more that kind of combined with Vikings, how like they'll pray to a particular god for a particular thing. It's more like, I need to pray to God for a thing. So like the father, for example, or the mother, let's say, because it's quite common. They'll pray to the mother to look after their sons during war.
Yeah.
And it'll be
That makes
like,
sense.
I need to pray to God to protect my sons, so I will pray to the mother of God. You know what I mean? It's that kind of thing. Then the
I like
other,
that sort of bit.
Yeah,
God
yeah.
has 7 inboxes for different types of prayers.
Exactly.
What does he feel like answering to
It's also like a combo between that and the Greek one of like those different pantheon bits. It's good.
So then we'll go the old gods of the forest. So the old nature gods worshipped by the children of the forest, and later the first men. It's still worshipped by the people of the
tree
north.
kids.
Yep, and a few other isolated people still worship it, but it's mainly just in the north that it's maintained. Prayers and offerings are made to the old gods in front of the trees, as we mentioned, and it's believed that the gods can see through the trees, which caused the Andals to cut them down in the south because they were like, no, your gods are blind here. Yeah,
No peeking.
exactly. And then there's 2 other gods, which I won't really talk about because they're not super important, but they exist. There's the drowned god, who the Iron Islands worship. And it's kind of
Who drowned him?
he had a fight with the
did.
storm god actually, but anyway, that's not the thing.
Really? Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah.
I was like, well.
And then there's it's a fun, actually I'll quickly say that's the reason, if anyone's read the book, seen the show, the Ironborn, when they appoint a new lord or whatever, they literally drown them and then resuscitate them, and it's the whole thing of if they're worthy, they will come back.
That's kind of fucking wild.
Yeah, it is a bit. And then there's Lord of Light, who is kind of a new god over in the east. You don't really see too much of it in the beginning of the book. That's more a thing that's like, I won't talk about it really because it's kind of a story point of the books, this kind of Lord of Light entering the kingdom. And it's meant to be
the Lord of
mysterious. And then the very final thing to quickly wrap up before my laptop dies. Yep. So there's 3 sort of guilds, if you will. There's the Night's Watch, the Order of Maesters, and the King's Guard. The Night's Watch, already talked about them a bunch. They maintain the wall in the far north and form a protective boundary against the tribes and monsters beyond the wall. They're split into Rangers, Stewards, and Builders. Fairly explanatory what each one do. Rangers go north to scout, the Builders maintain the wall, and the Stewards do admin stuff. Each of these divisions is led by a leader, Master Builder, Master Steward, Master Ranger, etc. And finally, the whole thing is run by the Lord Commander of the Night's Watch. Then you've got the King's Guard, who are royal bodyguards to the Iron Throne, regarded as the finest knights in the 7 Kingdoms, and they are sworn to protect the king. Pretty simple. There's not many of them. They're also sworn from kids and all that sort of stuff. They are led
How do they know
also...
if they're really good at their sworn from kids?
What?
You can make any fucking kid good at swords if you put a sword in his hand at 3
That's
years old
fair,
and never
actually.
let
Good
it
point.
out.
Yeah.
No. Sworn as in like sworn to have kids. They're not. They have to be like a famous knight to enter the King's Guard.
Right.
Oh,
Right.
Okay. I think it was like swearing it as
No,
kids.
that's all
to
good.
do
It's all
it.
good. And then there's the Order of, the King's Guard are also run by a Lord Commander. Then you've got the Order of Maesters. They are an order of scholars, healers, messengers, and scientists. They educate students at a place called the Citadel, which is located in Old Town, a city in the Reach. The Reach we mentioned. And yeah, basically their whole thing is like super wise old men who study for years. And there's basically a maester assigned to every major lord and city. So if you're in the north, in Winterfell, there'll be a maester assigned to the north to look after it.
They're the
Make
wise guy
history.
they ask all the questions of. They're
Exactly.
like, how do we do that? Oh, well, you need to...
Are they more keepers of
Snake
history
blood.
or advisors or just like learned people?
Yeah, they're kind of a bit of everything really. They kind of
Sick.
They mainly focus on educating, but they also fill a little bit of an advisory role.
They're 500 IQ.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yes, to cure his poison, you need to get some snake oil.
Get out of here, House MD.
Snake oil, exactly. But they're also
Good update, Jude.
yeah. They're also very much like fill the role of healer and all that sort of thing. Anyway,
They're the scientists
That-
in the medieval time.
that is Westeros and Game of Thrones.
Woo.
Um,
I was going to say it during the religion, but I forgot. But Jude, there's only one God, and his name is Death.
yeah, exactly. There's another belief as well.
I'm sure that was a sick reference.
Oh, yeah. Sick Oh.
Okay, I rescind my previous comment. I'm sure that was a reference.
Yes, precisely.
Thanks, Guy.
Yeah, but I hope you guys enjoyed learning
That
a
was
little bit
actually
about
really interesting.
Westeros.
That
and
was
stuff.
very, very cool.
I like the fundamental level that we learn about religion, we learn about the war, we learn about the economy.
Yeah. Well,
That's actually cool.
yeah, it's interesting because especially with you've got to kind of look at those. It's one of the big differences because people try to, I don't know, especially in like the Tolkien fandom. I always hear people go, "Oh, George R. R. Martin just wrote a worse version of Lord of the Rings," and I'm like, as a fan of Lord of the Rings, I disagree with that because it's just very different. You know, you've got Lord of the Rings, the super high fantasy, the elves stuff, which is, you know, more my shtick normally, but it is also kind of cool the way Game of Thrones has got this very realistic, you know, you can look at this kingdom and go, I see how that would work, you know?
Yeah.
I appreciate that with a lot of these sort of not high fantasy, but like detailed, like wide sprawling, like Civil War sort of fantasy type stories where it's less about a sort of monomyth like main story part and more just about this breaching world and the story that happens within it.
Exactly.
I very much appreciate that.
Yeah.
There was a quote, I don't know, I might butcher it, but there was a quote from George R. R. Martin that was like, Tolkien can write that King Aragon was good and he ruled good for years and years and years, but then he never asked what was Aragon's tax policy.
Yeah.
What was his policy?
What was his tax policy?
Which,
that's the sort of question they never asked.
But it's also one of those things, like, in the story of Lord of the Rings, who the hell cares about Aragon?
Oh, yeah, exactly. It's not that sort of
It's
story.
different themes, yeah.
Yeah, it's a fantasy. It's like it's a different
Political
type of story.
fantasy versus high fantasy.
It's funny, actually, because I rewatched, what's the word? Having watched Lord of the Rings recently, with Izzy, actually. It was, as I mentioned, because you kind of hear everyone talk about Aragorn becomes king and it's the time of peace. It's actually kind of super the opposite. Aragorn leads like huge wars and kills everyone that fought for Sauron.
It's peaceful.
Peaceful.
What? So he genocided everyone. Did he genocide the orcs?
The orcs would get killed off, yeah. But like the Haradrim, the Corsairs of Umber, all those guys, yeah, Aragorn just leads a massive army down south and slaughters them all.
I like how we're just leaving on the end of this Game of Thrones episode.
He did
we're like,
a genocide?
He genocided.
He did a genocide?
Well, it's not necessarily
could
confirmed,
he?
but anyway.
How could he do a
It's not
genocide?
that's bad.
How could he do a genocide?
Anyway,
He had such good hair.
That was a Game
Someone
of Thrones.
with such good hair could never do a genocide.
Thanks,
A man with that good a hair could never do a genocide.
thanks for listening to nerdy talks on living by the
Yeah.
law.
I just find out next time you go to a knife fight, bring 2 guns.
Exactly.
guns.
Or
Bring
bring
two
a
guns.
dragon. That'd help as
Or
well.
bring a dragon instead. If you can't find 2 guns, just bring your dragon.
Exactly.
Check us out on Facebook at Living by the Law and on Twitter, same handle.
Yeah.
We need that
back here
Twitter.
every
We need
second
those
week.
Twitter followers.
Please, for the love of God.
And if you'd like to
Hey,
contact us,
no, hey, shh, Matt. Shh. I'm talking to that guy, that person out there. You know who you are. I'm talking to you. I know that you opened up iTunes the other day and you went to write a review, but you weren't logged into your account. It didn't let you. Do it. Put that effort in. We need your reviews. If you don't give me a review, I will absolutely come to your house and I will squeeze it out of you.
and if you write a review, I will love you forever.
Yes.
You get that. That's the carrot of the stick.
If I can provide a better carrot to the stick, if you review us, Matt will never make a move on you.
I will. I promise. I will stay as far away from you as possible
If
at all times.
that's not motivation to write a review,
Matt,
I don't know what is.
You'll wake up one morning with a slightly wettened cheek. It's a kiss from Matt.
And that's when you know you haven't written a review.
Yeah, that's
Also,
that's a sign. That's a sign that Doyle is coming.
That's also so. If you'd like to contact us in any way, we do have a mail address, Gmail, livebylaw@gmail.com.
I thought you were about to tell them my house address. You can send us a letter. Tell us what the Gmail
at
is.
46 Wollongong Road.
Whoa! Don't say our addresses. God,
Whose address is it though?
I don't know. That's not my address.
What's the email address, Matthew?
Living
I
by
just
the
said
law
it,
at
live by
gmail.com.
law.
Correct.
And remember, winter's coming, and so is Matthew Doyle.
Nah.
Thank you and good night.
Boom.
Nah, I don't want to end on that.
Too late. No, it's already. Hey, listen. Here's the issue, Matt. You're not the editor.
And I've.
No! Oh, Matthew's been punked.
thank you for listening to Living by the Law. If you enjoyed our podcast, please leave us a review on iTunes and tell your friends. The link is in the description, and thank you in advance. Also, follow us on Facebook and Twitter at Living by the Law to keep updated on all the latest about our podcast. We have been, and always will be, living by the law. Thank you for your company, and good night.